I had had 4 pregnancy losses before I had my son, and I was completely shut down to the possibility that he would be safe and that he would come home with me.
Dr. Katy Huie Harrison is the founder of Undefining Motherhood, a research-informed brand helping moms reduce the mental load of pregnancy, postpartum, and early motherhood.
She is the brilliant and brutally honest voice behind Undefining Motherhood, a community of over 100,000 moms.
So what would you tell a first-time parent about what to expect about parenthood?
There will very likely be a lot of moments where you wonder if you made a mistake. That is normal. We all ask ourselves that question. It does not make you a bad parent. I can't imagine that a loving, emotionally available parent is thinking, oh gosh, I'm such a bad parent, and feeling bad about that. They're only doing it because they're loving and they're emotionally available.
Because they care.
Exactly. It's actually a sign that you got this.
If you could go back in time and you could do anything all over again, what would it be and why?
I wish I could go back and I could tell my pregnant self, it's okay to be afraid, but you deserve to have as much joy as you have fear.
Hi, Katy. Welcome to All Over Again podcast.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
It's funny because we actually met, I think, during the pandemic. In the social sphere?
In the social sphere, yeah. I mean, I don't know when, but I've known you for a long time.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And then we met in person. At a conference. And now I get to see you again.
Thank
it is so
goodness.
fun. I mean, it's been a long time coming.
It needed to happen.
Remind me why you come to New York City quite a bit for interviews and such, right?
I come anytime I'm doing like TV interviews. Yes, I do. I'm a parenting researcher. And so I come and do a lot of interviews for different segments about, motherhood and the mental load and, things that we can do to sort of make life better and easier for mom.
Wait, so I have a question for you on pitching. Do you pitch them, or at this point they have you as a resource, so they just give you a shout?
Both.
Amazing.
Yes. At first it was me pitching. And now, you have to keep actively pitching. They're not going to come to you as a resource unless they really know you as a resource. But definitely I do at this point get phone calls or messages on my email. It's that I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but I always answer New York numbers because it's 9 times out of 10 a producer.
Also, if you're a spammer, that is not an invitation.
Not even a little bit. I'm not. No. You will get blocked and reported real fast. I don't think you actually care, but.
How would you describe yourself to someone you've just met in 3 adjectives?
I am vibrant, joyful, and anxious.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah.
I see the vibrant and the joyful. I don't see the anxious part. We have talked a little bit about the anxious part. Let's talk a little bit about the joyful and vibrant, and then maybe you can share a little bit about the history of the anxious part and how you manage that.
Yes. I have always been someone who was very peppy is the word that was used to describe me when I was a kid. I remember when I was in high school, I had someone ask me once, like, do your cheeks hurt from how much you smile? And part of that was just naivety about the world. And, but part of it was just my inherent personality. I've also always struggled with anxiety. And so I imagine as overachieving people with neurodiversities do, there's a lot of masking that comes with that. So perhaps some of that optimism and that pep and that smile was perhaps a little bit of masking for the anxiety that was happening. But then in adulthood, a lot of things happen in adulthood that are really hard. And seasons of that between recurrent pregnancy loss and postpartum anxiety and the unexpected, sudden sort of cancer diagnosis and then rapid decline and death of my dad. There have been a lot of moments that have led me to become a lot more negative, a lot more glass half empty as opposed to glass half full. And so I'm working very hard on not finding positivity necessarily in places where it's not, but just remembering to find the joy and find the vibrance in moments and say, okay, this might be a hard thing but let me take in one thing that is joyful about it. And this might be a great thing. So let me take in 2 or 3 things that are joyful about it.
Love that.
As a way of sort of trying to intentionally retrain my brain to have some of that back, because it's so much a part of who I am, and I don't want to let myself lose that.
And I don't want to gloss over the fact that you lost your dad. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
I think the last time we spoke, you were struggling with sandwich generationing.
Yes.
I did not realize that.
So the hard part is that
terribly sorry.
my dad was actually part of my big support system for sandwich generationing. I lost him 2 years ago, almost to the day. Almost to the day. We're 2 days shy. And it was very, very, very not sudden in that, like, we got a phone call. I was in New York when he was diagnosed with liver cancer, and have very traumatic memories from JFK trying to get myself back home. And so I was already struggling with sandwich generation, and my parents were a big part of that support system. And now one of those supporters is gone, and the other one, of course, has had to deal with the loss of her partner. So it's an even bigger struggle now than it was the last time we talked about it.
Sandwich generationing is such uncharted water for so many of us. What would you recommend to someone seeing that you are in it, have been in it, have seen both sides of it? What would you recommend to somebody who's just sort of entering the world of sandwich generationing?
Give yourself so much grace, because there was a time when most of us, right? Nothing's true for everyone, but when most people had multi-generation care for young children. And that's not to diminish the struggles and the grief that they went through later in life. They were incredibly intense, but these were usually happening at separate times. And as we have children older, our parents, in many cases, mine did have children older. Unfortunately, it leads to this place where often we have babies, toddlers, preschoolers, elementary schoolers, and we're also dealing with caring for aging parents. And we live in a world that's already piling too much onto us on top of that. So being willing to recognize that no one can do this perfectly. No one can even honestly do it gracefully. No matter what they show, you're not failing. Anything you can choose to let go is worth letting go. Anything you can choose to do good enough is good enough, because this is simply a phase to be gotten through. It is not a time when we need to hold ourselves against this Instagram standard of what people do, because it's just not it's not our life, and it can't be our life, and we're going to kill ourselves if we try to make it that way.
And you bring up a good point. I don't think people are talking about it.
I
mean, they are, but they're not. I mean, you're not seeing discussions, or I'm not seeing discussions about it in the social sphere.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, because I'm the kind of person who should be having those discussions, and I'm not. And I will, because they're really important. I think I see a lot more talk about sandwich generation where people have teenagers and aging parents. And that is, I am confident, equally difficult with a different set of struggles. But I don't see it as much in this sort of early. I have a 4 and an almost 9-year-old. And I don't see it nearly as much in this age when you're trying to do a bedtime, but you also need to go get someone off the floor. Or you're in the middle of a trip and all of a sudden something bad happens and you have to get home, or you can't travel and leave the way that you had planned to because you don't have people to care for the kids. It brings about a very different set of struggles.
It really does. And I'm getting the chills because I remember having to, have those moments where I was consistently like checking my phone because I had, my parents are on the West Coast. And so, you have this need to show up for your own life, but then you also need to be present in their lives. And when the timing is different, it's always very stressful. Like, what am I waking up to? Is it okay to go to bed right now? Am I going to miss anything?
Yeah, it's so much. And I mean, like, my mom would definitely, I'm sure, attest to the fact that I snap at her so much more than is reasonable. And she's only an hour away. And my in-laws are 7 minutes from my house, which helps tremendously. I mean, it makes the day-to-day a little bit tougher, but, you know, it also is a wonderful, wonderful thing that we're lucky to have. But it is amazing how when you're caring for so many people and then you have someone who you're not caring for as much, it becomes very easy to not put the patience and the grace and the love into that to the level that you need to, because you just feel spent of it. So I'm just thinking, I'm recording a new segment tonight, and my mom sent me a text message yesterday while I was here in New York, and she said, "Hey, I still don't have the link to watch it." And I was like, "I haven't received the link to watch it. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to send you something that I don't even have?" And then I realized after, and actually I'm just processing now, wow, that was not a necessary reaction. But I think because I'm here and for just 2.5 days, I'm not taking care of anyone but myself. This moment of feeling like someone needed something from me just set me off in a way that was, I don't want to be hard on myself and say it was overblown. I understand where it was coming from, but it certainly was not something that was warranted by the message that I received.
You know, it's interesting. So first and foremost, give yourself some grace. I'm going to give you back the same counsel that you just shared. Secondly, as you're talking about this, what I'm thinking about is sometimes almost the way your mom showed up, like she's excited for you to give her this information because she's so proud of her daughter. In many ways, our children do the same thing to us. And it's also incredibly frustrating, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm so excited, but I need to know what it is right now. And like, it's very nerve-wracking, you know, to be around. It's
overstimulating. And it's that mommy, like, mommy, watch me, mommy, look at this.
Yes.
Like, it's because they crave our attention because we're safe and they love us and they want to be seen by us all the time. And we're so lucky to have that. Yes. And yet
our parents are doing the same thing.
Isn't that
insane?
Right.
I mean, I never thought about that until this conversation.
I have not thought of it either. And it's so true. It's that expression of like love and wanting you to be present and being, you know, all of these things that still becomes overstimulating.
Yes. So fascinating.
It's really fascinating.
So you do a ton of research. So I'm curious to see if there's any research that you're going to go down the rabbit hole on this one.
Oh, we'll find out.
I'm finding synergies like in talking to you. So speaking of research, what are you researching right now?
Right now, I am researching the ways in which the way that we communicate and interact with our children impacts the way that we communicate and interact with ourselves. And particularly the conversations, those internal conversations that we have with ourselves before and after interactions. I did this experiment in September where I recorded myself for 30 days. Talking about something that happened in parenting that day and what different parenting styles would say I should have done and what I actually did. And what I discovered was that I get very, I want to say triggered. I'm using that word with caution because I don't mean it in the PTSD sense, which deserves a lot of weight that it carries. But I get there's something in me that really reacts very negatively and becomes very uptight and very anxious to too much stimulation. And I become a very negative self-talker. And then I'm speaking negatively to myself in my head. And then I find myself being shorter and more curt with my children. And so what that little experiment revealed to me is really the benefit of taking the time to step back from a situation and review after the fact, and say, where was my choice and my behavior, and specifically my self-talk, coming from? Was it coming from me? Was it coming from my beliefs, my values, my instincts? Was it coming from what my mom would have said about it? Was it coming from what I would project onto my mom saying about it, but she never actually has said?
Wow.
Is it coming from a parenting theory that I'm seeing all over the internet that's telling me I should have done it this way? I posted an Instagram story recently saying that I'm having a really hard time with my 4-year-old and her sleep at night because she is waking up in the middle of the night crying for me. And when I go up to her room, I end up sleeping in the bed with her and I don't sleep well. And so I'm exhausted. And this is not working for me and this is not sustainable. And I was asking just on Instagram stories, that close community of people you trust on Instagram, like, does anyone have tips? And I had so many responses where people said, I'm unfollowing you for this. I can't believe that you would not just go comfort her. And I'm like, well, okay, I think we're learning.
Are you kidding me?
We're learning a lot about our society first when unfollowing is like a not a threat, but just like, that's fine. You're welcome. I only want.
But people, that seems like yes. Go feel
I
free.
only want you filling your cup and your time with people who make you feel good.
Yes,
and also
that seems crazy and excessive to be like. Threaten it, but they're not saying it. Then just do it. Why do they have the need to tell you? Like they're mad about it for some reason. Yeah.
And also,
like,
and I think that's because they're projecting something that's going on in their minds.
Yes.
It's not about me. It's about them.
Yes.
But it's this reminder that for some people, going up and sleeping in their child's room works wonderfully for them. And it's what I've been doing, and I'm not rested, and I'm exhausted, and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I wish it did because I actually love snuggling with her and doing that, but I'm not getting the rest I need. And so clearly this is not going to work as our long-term solution to this problem, and I don't know exactly what is going to work. But I think what I had to sort of think about with this is I have to take my steps back from it. And I have to say, what was difficult about the middle of the night? What was difficult about this thing this person said? What have I been saying or doing in front of my daughter based on what I'm saying to myself? Because I notice myself saying things like, you want to be a calming presence. You want to be a supportive mom. But then she might have a meltdown one night and have a hard time regulating. And all of a sudden, oh my God, Katy, like, you should be better at this. Like, you research this stuff. You know all about this. You should be handling this better. This is ridiculous. And not only is that not fair to me, but it's then making me shorter with her. It's something that she's probably feeding off of, and it might be part of the reason she's having trouble regulating because I'm having trouble regulating.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really just very interested in right now is looking at how do we talk to ourselves, and how does that impact how we're talking to our kids, to our peers, to our mom friends, and trying to support one another. Because I think as we kind of started with, right, like we all just need so much more grace, but it's a lot easier to say that than it is to embody it.
And I think what I'm also hearing you say is that you can be an expert in a particular topic, subject matter, and at the same time, you're still allowed to have feelings and emotions and be a human.
Absolutely.
I think that's okay.
Absolutely. And honestly, what most people are expert in, it's harder for them to embody in their own lives because you don't see the forest through the trees. Most people I know who are chefs don't cook when they're at home.
It's true.
Most people I know who are home organizers have crazy messy houses because they have all the storage solutions for their clients. They have all of these different things going on that are used to help other people be this way. It's very difficult to understand something theoretically and be the expert in that thing and then to practically implement it in your own life, because part of being the expert, which is a term I'm not even totally comfortable with, as an academic, but we use it. Part of being the expert is seeing the entire forest. And when you're living your life, you're not in the forest. You're always in the trees. You're always in the weeds. And so it becomes much more difficult.
That makes all the sense.
Yeah.
So what would you tell a first-time parent about what to expect about parenthood and particularly motherhood?
I would tell them that there will very likely be a lot of moments where you wonder if you made a mistake.
Mm.
And that is normal, that we all ask ourselves that question, that it does not make you a bad parent, and that it should not scare you because they're moments. You're not going to believe that most of the time. You're not going to believe that very much of the time at all, actually. But you are going to have moments where this question seeps in. And because we don't say that out loud, because we don't speak that culturally, when it happens, we become we feel so much shame that this thought, that is a thought every parent either has or represses at some points, especially in those earliest days, becomes something bigger for some of us.
Fascinating.
And so I think it's really important for people to know sometimes you're going to hate it. And that's not scary. That doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. That doesn't mean there won't be a tremendous amount of joy, because there will be so much joy in ways that you cannot even fathom. And if you can take those moments of joy and let them soak in and take that like mental snapshot in your head of the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but then you can also let the thoughts of how hard it is and the negative talk about it run through your mind without judging yourself for it and putting weight into it by then saying, oh my God, I'm such a bad mom for thinking that. I bet no other mom thinks that. I can't believe I said that. Well, I'm telling you, other moms do think that. And other dads think that. All parents, regardless of gender, at some point say, oh my God, what did I do? Am I good enough at this? And
Am I cut out for this?
am I cut out for this? And we have to understand that everyone thinks this at some point, that does not mean it is going to be your norm. It does not mean you are bad. It does not mean you are wrong. It does not mean you weren't meant for it. It does not mean you are undeserving of it. It means you're human. And the most important thing we can do is say, hey, I feel this really hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else has also felt this really hard thing. And it's okay that I'm feeling this right now. And I mean, the way parenthood goes, it's probably only going to be 10 seconds until something happens that just makes your heart explode. But, I think we have this very thin line between wanting to warn parents so they're emotionally prepared and wanting to not scare them. And I think sometimes we lean so hard into not scaring them and not saying, oh, just you wait, that we also don't let them know, hey, it's okay to really hate this sometimes. And it's also okay to really, really, really love it. And if you went through struggles to get there, you don't need to feel guilty for the hard moments. And I really hope you can soak in the wonderful ones because you've earned it.
And isn't there some sort of correlation between having these thoughts in the first place and caring? Because my guess
Absolutely,
is,
yes.
right? My guess is that an unfit parent is probably not even thinking about whether or not they are a good or a bad parent or beating themselves up or, right?
I can't imagine that a loving, emotionally available parent is thinking, oh gosh, I'm such a bad parent, and feeling bad about that. If they're loving, they're only doing it because they're loving and they're emotionally available.
Because they care.
Exactly. So that it's actually a sign that you got this. That you don't always feel like you got this, but you got this, and you're doing great. And this is normal. And I think just normalizing the good, normalizing the bad. There are moments where I look at my children and I feel like if there were a fly on the wall, they would think I were staring at a shrine. I am just so overwhelmed by how unbelievable they are. But I don't then go back after those moments and think about, wow, look what a good mom I am, loving my kids so much. I only go back and think about it when I'm overwhelmed and overstimulated and I'm like, oh my God, why do I have to deal with this every day? And those are the moments I'm giving the weight to in my brain. And I really need to be giving at least equal, if not more weight to all of those incredibly positive ones. Because I think that's how we start to change that dialogue to ourselves. And that comes through in what our children hear us say about ourselves and in the people we are with them.
What is something that you repeatedly tell your children every day?
You can do hard things, and it's okay if you don't always want to. But sometimes we have to. Another thing I tell my children every day is always be kind. And that includes being kind to yourself. I'm very good at being kind to everyone but myself. And I really want my children to know how to be kind to themselves too.
That resonates. And I'm curious to know, have you done any research to uncover what that trauma is from?
There are so many places that could come from. I believe that there is a very large social aspect to it. I think a lot of mom guilt is significantly more prevalent and reported than dad guilt. It's just
Never heard of dad guilt. Have you?
Well, so in surveys where parents report guilt, and I don't have the exact studies off the top of my head, but I'm remembering about 20 to 30% of dads reporting feeling guilty about parenting decisions at some point. And I believe over 90% of moms report feeling guilty about parenting decisions. So certainly I think it comes from the expectations that we have been raised with. Not necessarily even from our parents, just from our society. Little girls were given baby dolls and little boys were given trucks when I was a kid in the 80s. And there's an extent to which that's still true and an extent to which it's changing. The narrative for us has always been that there's a right way to do this, that there's a good way to do this. And I mean, now we have so many outlets of media and social media and in which we're consuming that all of these ways of doing it, they conflict. You can't get it right. You can't feel good about yourself. That's why, I mean, my entire platform is Undefining Motherhood, because it's the definitions that box us in and that leave us feeling guilty and shameful for just doing what comes naturally to us or what feels right to us, or maybe for not doing what comes naturally and feels right because we hear a voice and we listen to that voice when it's not our own. So, you know, that is the cultural element is a really big part of it. And that's something we've been working through for centuries. So it's a sort of generational trauma that we've all got to work on slowly breaking at a whole social level. And then for me personally, I am a perfectionist, and I am a very, very, very driven person. And I remember I told my dad when I skipped class for the first time when I was in college, and he celebrated me. And he was like, I'm going to send $20 to your checking account so you can get something to celebrate yourself. Because he always said my parents had to spend their lives figuring out how to make me not be so hard on myself and not push myself so hard. They didn't have to say, hey, have you done your homework? They didn't have to push me to do well. I pushed myself not only hard enough, but too hard, where even in Georgia in the 90s, they could see the detriment in that. And so, you know, I think there's that combination. Some people simply feel this more acutely than others. Some people push themselves harder than others. Some people speak to themselves more harshly than others. But also, there is this cultural narrative that's made it so hard for moms. And that's why most of us experience guilt and shame where, you know, dads may or may not.
It's a lot to take in.
I know.
It's amazing. You and I have talked a little bit about anxiety.
Yes.
And what anxiety looks like. And I want you to delve into that. You speak to a lot of your audience about postpartum anxiety in particular.
Yes.
And you and I have talked about anxiety that you have felt and that you actually discovered and not until, you know, someone else pointed it out to you.
Right.
Right?
Right. I've dealt with it my whole life, but I didn't know that I had diagnosable anxiety. I didn't know that I had panic attacks until my now husband pointed out to me when I was 22.
So I want to know what that looked like for you. And also, do you think there's a correlation between anxiety and a type A behavioral sort of subset?
So I'll start with the second one. And I would say yes, definitely, because people with anxiety are people who inherently overanalyze everything. They replay situations in their minds. They worry. The anticipatory anxiety before an event or something that we're going to do is often worse than the actual experience that we're anxious about. And so in that way, anxiety does tend to make people more likely to be people who need to be prepared, who need to, have very organized schedules and know exactly what's coming, because it gives them a sense of control in this world that feels so out of control to us. However, there's also an extent to which people with anxiety simply shut down because they're so overwhelmed. And so what you also see is someone who can't have any of the systems, who can't be super organized because their brain is just too overwhelmed by everything going on in it to even make the space for that. So I think both of those things can be true, and they can be true in the same person at different phases in life. They certainly have both been true for me at different stages in life, or even at the same time, but in different aspects of life. So, my children's school calendar is very organized. Their extracurriculars are very organized. We have a system between my husband and me to manage all of that. But I regularly have my therapist call me 10 minutes into our session because I'm not there. And I miss that.
This is so resonating.
Yes. So you can have the anxiety helping you be more type A in certain ways, and then in other ways there's no space for it.
What does anxiety look like for you, and how did you discover it?
Well, for me, it looks all sorts of ways. But the biggest thing is the overthinking, the overanalyzing, the spinning of thoughts until they spiral out of control. And I now have 20 years of therapy and research and work under my belt to get rid of that. So while it used to be this doomsday scenario, imagining panic attacks that had me falling to the floor because my legs could not support their own weight, I don't have that kind of anxiety anymore. My brain doesn't usually spiral anymore because I've done cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, CBT and ACT would be what you would look those up as. And I've trained my brain not to do that. So now it's more about feeling it in my body and learning, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Oh, my hips are clenched. My shoulders are clenched. My jaw is clenched. This is a sign of anxiety. Oh, I'm being snippy with my family. This is actually me being anxious, because it as you work to improve it, how it looks evolves. And so you kind of have to constantly stay on top of it. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? With the, reflecting back on situations with yourself, your family, how you're talking to yourself, or how you handled an interaction with your kids, just the reflecting back and saying, oh, I was actually anxious in that moment. That's what this feeling was, because then you can recognize it earlier next time.
And anxiety is not an actual emotion that we seem to be putting a whole lot of description for, even with our children, right? It's like, oh, anxious means worried.
Well, there's the diagnosable
right, but
anxiety.
But that is what the sort of the textbook, if you're anxious, you're worried. But anxiety, insofar as what I've experienced, doesn't necessarily need to be worry.
No, absolutely not.
It's the overspinning and sort of the overstimulation and the rapid fire questions and discussion I'm having in my own head.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, that is worry. It may not feel like worry. You might not be worrying about something specific. You're worrying about whether you're going to remember all the things, whether you're going to do all the things, how are all the things going to turn out. So all of those things are spinning in your head because they're trying to make sure you don't forget and give you this sense of control. But you're going to forget because there are too many of them, and they won't stop spinning long enough for you to do something about slowing them down.
Fair point. Fair point. So worry does not necessarily mean being scared either.
I don't think so. No, I
don't
think
that's interesting, because that's also another sort of offshoot that
absolutely
worry gets coined.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is seeking a sense of control. That's really a big part of what we're doing. And so worry does not necessarily equal being scared. Anxiety does not necessarily equal being scared. But I'm feeling anxious as if it's a synonym for worried is also different from someone who meets the DSM-5 criteria for generalized anxiety disorder or panic disorder saying I'm having anxiety or I'm being anxious. Those are two. Everyone can experience moments of anxiety. Everyone experiences moments of feeling anxious, but not everyone has anxiety.
Fair point. So in looking back, if you could go back in time and you could do anything all over again, what would it be and why?
It would be the first year of my son's life and the pregnancy that led up to it because of anxiety. Because I had 4 pregnancy losses before I had my son, and I was completely shut down to the possibility that he would be safe and that he would come home with me. And I went into the hospital saying to my husband, if we get to bring him home, then, and questions would follow. And my husband said, Katy, we're in the hospital to have a baby. Maybe it's time to stop saying if. And I couldn't stop. And that was before I did work in the reproductive world. And even still, I couldn't stop. And the emotional whiplash that comes from saying, if I get to bring this child home to now being responsible for them is so intense. And I developed debilitating postpartum anxiety. And I don't even remember large portions of the first year of my son's life. And it devastates me because when I had my daughter 4.5 years later, I was worried that the same thing would happen again. And instead, I was so overcome by the feeling of, oh my gosh, this is what parents describe experiencing, which of course I had experienced with my son millions of times over the years, but not in the first year. And I wish I could go back and I could tell my pregnant self, it's okay to be afraid, but you deserve to have as much joy as you have fear. And it's okay to go back on medication, even though you're pregnant, because I would have likely entered into that postpartum period in a significantly better headspace that would have allowed me the time that my baby deserved and that I deserve. And if you're someone who's going through this, I really want you to hear me on this one. The good news is it doesn't impact our relationship at all. Jack and I could not be closer, and we have the best relationship. So I do want people to know that's what I would do all over again, but I would do it all over again because it makes me sad for what I missed, not because it has changed anything long term. Everything now is exactly as I would want it to be.
I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability. What parting words would you share with parents about postpartum anxiety?
I would tell them that being aware of postpartum mental health struggles in general is very important. And having a plan in place in case you experience them can be truly life-saving. So if you have not yet had your baby, but you're in that place, and this is something we do in the postpartum playbook, make an action plan. And that doesn't have to be big. That sounds big, right?
Yes.
Find a therapist who specializes in postpartum. You can do it on Psychology Today, and you can look that up as a specialty. You can also do it through the resource finder on Postpartum Support International. Find a therapist and find a backup therapist. And go ahead and plug their numbers into your phone and write it down somewhere so that your partner has it. And that way, if you need support, you don't have to go find it when you're in the throes of it, because it's so hard to pull yourself up enough to even know how to start that conversation, to even know what to put into Google. So if you can do that ahead of time, one, research actually tells us that educating yourself about it ahead of time and having a plan decreases your likelihood of having severe perinatal mood disorders postpartum, not having them at all, but of having them severely. It does decrease your risk of that. And two, if that is you, then you're going to already have a plan and you're going to know what to do, and you can be taken care of the way you deserve.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Katy, Huie Harrison, my dear friend Katy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so
Means the world.
much for having me. This has been an honor.
Thank you.